Okay, guys, welcome Friday, October 30th. Yesterday, you took your test on finding slope and y-intercept. And so some feedback on that so far is the grades have been really, really good. I know a lot of you have contacted me about questions, and so I'm getting to those. If you have a question and you have not sent it yet, please email me the question or send it to me in a Google Hangout or email me on Schoology. And then we can talk about whatever it is that you're having trouble with. That test is due today. So make sure that you've completed it. If you have not, in the Friday folder on Schoology, I put a Google slide with the test code on CMS. So make sure that you have gone in there and completed that. That test is due today. Those grades are going in this weekend. I am going to update the grade book today. Make sure that, and it's going to include both those tests that you've taken so far. So any questions, like I said, send them to me and I'll get to them. I know some of you have already sent them. I am getting to those questions. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to apply now what we've learned. And we're going to take, well, now that I know how to find slope from tables and graphs, how can I express it in an equation form? And we're going to write them in what we call the slope-intercept form. And so those terms should be familiar with you, right? We know what slope is. It's the steepness of the line, and we know how to find it. We know the y-intercept is where the line crosses or touches the y-axis, and we know how to find it. So now we're going to put it into an equation form. And the way we write an equation is what we write it in y equals mx plus b format. And so we're going to talk about, well, what are the individual components of a equation? Like what is a y? What is an x? What does m mean? And then what is b? And so we're going to explain how we use slope and y-intercept and this equation, y equals mx plus b, to write the equation of a linear relationship. So let's review. So we know that how to find the slope here, and the slope is going to be the change in y over the change in x. So let's go look at it. Now remember, we only need really 2 points from the table and graph to find the change in y over the change in x, or to find what we call slope. So when I'm looking at this, I want to know, is it an increase or a decrease from 24 to 48? And we see that it is an increase. And in this case, how much are we increasing by? Well, we're doubling 24, so that's an increase of 24. Then I want to know, well, is it an increase or decrease from 7 to 15? We know that we get bigger when we go from 7 to 15. The question is by how much? And in this case, it's 8. When I look at my Sorry, guys. When I look at my slope here, I'm going to say, well, what is 24, change in y, divided by the change in x, which is 8, and that tells me that the slope here is going to be 3. So when we're looking for the y-intercept, remember, we want to take whatever the slope is, and we're going to multiply it by the x value. 7 times 3 gives me 21. 15 times 3 gives me 45. And then 20 times 3 gives me 60. So what we spent time talking about with the y-intercept was, what do we notice that's the same about all of these processes, and what is the pattern we see? Well, I know that 21 is 3 less than 24. I see 45 is 3 less than 48. I see 60 is 3 less than 63. So for each of these, I need to make sure to make the y work. I need to add 3. Add 3. And we call this that extra step, right? The extra process. Add 3. And that extra step of plus 3 is our y-intercept. Kind of a review of what we just took a test on. Like I said, you guys did awesome on it, so good job. Now, some key things here for today's instruction and moving forward is that we really need to make sure we understand that that was a positive 3 for slope and a positive 3 for the y-intercept, because it's going to make a difference when we start inputting these into the linear slope-intercept form linear equation. Okay, so because it's going to change the way the equation looks if it's negative. So make sure that you understand that we need to hold on to those positives and negatives for the next. All right, so what is this equation y equals mx plus b mean, or what is the vocabulary that's associated with it? When we look at the equation y equals mx plus b, so remember we call this slope-intercept form. When you guys did input-output tables, that's essentially what we have here. And I input an x of 7, I did a process, it kicks out a y of 24. And so our y is our output value. It's like, what is our solution once I do all the math? We input x values into this equation to get a y. Now, What we did to find the y value, right, was we multiplied the x times the slope. So that's why we have the slope here. And so when we look at the letter m is where our slope will go. So when we're writing these equations, literally we're going to substitute whatever we get for slope in for the letter m. Now, the back part of this is that extra step we've talked about, right? So if we're going to look at our example here in a minute, what did I add on to get to y? Right? I took my slope here, I multiplied it by the x values, the input values of my table. Then I wanted to know, did it give me y? Well, if it didn't, what was that extra step that I needed to get to y? So we get an output is equal to the slope times an input plus the extra step or the y-intercept. So let's go look at our table and use that as an example. So if we're looking at what we did back up here with this work, I just duplicated the table here. I don't have all the work, but I duplicated the table. We knew that the slope of this table was 3. That's going to be my m, right? Then we knew that when I multiplied 7 times 3, because I took my input of x, multiplied it by my slope, it gave me 21. But then I needed to do that extra step of adding 3. So that extra step, that's going to be your y-intercept, which is also going to be the letter b. So what does that look like when we're actually writing the equation now? So once we have the slope identified, and once we have the y-intercept or that extra step identified, all we have to do now is substitute those numbers in place of the letters. So y and x will be a constant always in the equation. We're not going to change those. Those are changed depending on what you put in the table. What will change and what we're going to write is, well, we need to identify what do we put for m? What do we substitute for the letter m? And in this case, it's the slope. And in this specific case, my slope was 3. Then I said, okay, well, when I put a 3 in for x and I multiplied it by 7, did it give me 24? And the answer is no, it gave me 21. So we had to do that extra step, and my y-intercept in this case is 3. So all we're doing is substituting 3 in for b. So that's how the process that you guys are going to look at eventually. Now, what you guys are going to be do today is just practicing substituting equations, substituting slope for m and y-intercept for b. So an example of something that you're going to be asked to do is to, if I give you the slope, which remember we're saying the big thing, keywords here today is m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. So we're always going to be writing these equations in y equals, they will always start with y equals, and then the coefficient of x will be the slope, or the letter m, and then the y-intercept is going to be the letter b. So if I had a slope of -4 and a y-intercept of -2, well, slope goes with x, it's the m, so I'm going to type it in as the coefficient of x. Now you notice here I don't have that plus b part, because if you notice that my y-intercept is -2. Now you could write it like this, plus -2. That is not incorrect. You won't see it written that way. We will not, so that's not an incorrect way, but that's not how we're going to write them. So how we're going to write them, when it's a negative, I'm literally just going to write -2. So my equation here is y equals -4x minus 2. I don't need to write plus -2. I'm just going to write what I see as the y-intercept. So let's go look at another example. So if I see the slope is 3/4 and the y-intercept is 0.25, I'm telling you that's what it is for the line. Tell me the equation. Well, I know slope goes here because it's m. So I have 3/4. And I see it's a positive 0.25, so then I'm going to put plus 0.25. Okay, don't be intimidated by fractions. Don't be intimidated by the decimals. We're not really doing any calculations with them today. So just literally, what do you see and what would it look like in the equation? So let's look at it. So that's just a duplicate example. So let's look at another one. So what if I put in negative 0.25 and then a y-intercept of -2/5. Again, don't panic because those numbers are not nice looking. Literally, okay, if m is equal to -0.25, well, then I'm going to place it where m would go. And I see that m goes with the x in front of the x value. So in front of the x, I'm going to type in -0.25. And then I see that it's a -2/5. So remember, we're not going to write plus -2/5. I'm going to write what I see, and I'm going to see, oh, 2/5. So the equation here would be y equals negative 0.25x minus 2/5. Okay, sorry about that, guys, if you heard my daughter in the background. So what is it that you're going to do today? This video is your notes, essentially your instruction. And I don't overthink today's activity. I know you're like, Coach, come on, like, is it harder than this? And we are going to push a little farther, right? We're going to push you guys next week. Give a table. What's the linear equation in slope intercept? Here's a graph. What's the linear equation in slope intercept form? But for today, we're just practicing. Can you build the equation, right? So today is more about vocabulary, understanding that m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. Today is understanding how do we build a linear equation in slope-intercept form. And today is more about can you substitute those numbers into the correct location. So here's your agenda. If you need to go back and rewatch this, you obviously have the ability to because this is in your Schoology, so you can pause it, rewind it, take notes. I suggest if you are taking notes, which you should be, write down that vocabulary and make sure that you know y is the output, m is the slope, x is the input, b is the y-intercept. And so really today we're not working with the y and the x. We will eventually, but for right now we are not working with the y and the x. We are looking specifically at m is slope, where does it go in the equation? B is y-intercept, where does it go in the equation? And then what does the equation look like when the slope is negative or the y-intercept is negative or both are negative? Okay, so just make sure you really pay attention to that. There's a practice in Schoology. It's, I believe, 6 questions. There's some matching. There's a true false. There's a fill in the blank drop down. Now, on the fill in the blank drop down, you need to make sure that you guys pay attention to those numbers. And there is also going to be another video for you guys that explains the assignment. And then, actually, I'm going to attach. We're going to go look at the assignment. Sorry. Then make sure that you haven't finished your test if you have not. And then obviously, you guys have an amazing weekend. You guys are working very hard. I'm super proud of those test scores. Super proud of you guys. We're doing the best we can in the world that we're living in. And I have to say, you guys are doing an amazing job lately. And so keep doing what you're doing. Keep asking questions. Reach out to me. And like I said, easy assignment on Friday. Don't overthink this. We're going to go look at it right now and keep doing what you're doing. Like I said that about 10 times. So let's go look at the assignment. Okay, so if we go into Schoology, you go into y'all's class. I'm going to go to any of my pre-AP classes. It should be all the same. So this video will be posted here, so that way you can watch it. And if we go down the second 9 weeks, this week, on Friday, you'll see writing a linear equations given the slope and the y-intercept. 2 attempts to complete it, so let's go look at it. Obviously, yours is going to look different when you open it than mine, but we're going to preview it. So 2 attempts to complete this. So if you don't make 100, go back and work on it. And so question 1 is going to ask you to match the vocabulary. Okay, so what does the y in y equals mx plus b stand for? What does the m for that stand for? What is the x and what is the b? So this one is the different. Okay, so we haven't done a question like this, so I really wanted to show you guys how to solve this. So make sure that you're placing the numbers in the correct location that properly place the slope of +4 and the y-intercept of 2 in the correct location when writing a linear equation in y equals mx plus b form. So the key thing here is slope is 4, y-intercept is 2, so where would they go? So when you click on these, you'll see 4 and 2, 4 and 2. So where should the 4 go? Where should the 2 go? So if the slope is 4, select 4 where it belongs. The y-intercept is 2, select 2 where it belongs. Okay. This one, I want you to pick the correct equation. So slope of -2 and a y-intercept of -5. Which one of these equations is that representation? multiple choice. True, false. So Sarah was given a following math question. A linear equation has a slope of -4 and a y-intercept of -3. What is the linear equation in y equals mx plus b form? So she said that it's -4x plus 3. And I want to know, is that true or false? Did she do it right? Did she do it wrong? There's no justification. It's literally, did she do it right? Did she do it wrong? I want to see if you're able to recognize if there's a mistake or if she read it correctly. And then the last one is another matching. So I want you to match these definitions and our representation. So I have a slope of -2.5 and a y-intercept of +4. Which one of these matches that? Here I've got this equation. Which one of them shows the slope and the y-intercept? Here I have slope and y-intercept, which is the equation. Here's an equation. Which one identifies slope and y-intercept? So working within back and forth, right? That's all you got today. Any test questions, make sure you go back and complete them. Any questions for me, make sure you guys come and ask. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. Good luck. Let me know.